Is thirst a biological imperative, or merely a failure of logistics? We exist on planets where water is heavy, finite, and cruelly prone to evaporation. But the artifact resting on the dampening pad before us suggests a solution that bypasses the water cycle entirely. It implies that if one cannot find a river, one must punch a hole in geometry to steal one. This is the standard issue Spatial-Fold Hydro-Canteen, a relic recovered from the hyper-arid, salt wastes of Sector 4. Let us break the seal on the containment unit and document what remains. To the unassisted eye, the object is aggressively mundane. It appears to be a battered canister of stamped alloy, coated in a chipping, olive-drab polymer. It bears the distinct scars of frontline utility, dents from shrapnel, deep scratches from silicate sandstorms, and the silvered friction wear of a belt clip. It resembles the equipment of any conscripted soldier from any era. However, the first anomaly presents itself when we attempt to lift it. Regardless of whether the cap is open or closed, the canteen maintains a static mass of exactly 2.4 kilograms. It does not slosh. There is no shift in the center of gravity. This is our first indication that the liquid, inside, is not effectively interacting with the gravity of our laboratory. Reference Plate 1A, the cross-sectional tomography scan. Shutterstock. Standard imaging fails to resolve the interior walls. The radar waves do not bounce back, they elongate. The internal geometry of this vessel is non-Euclidean. The neck of the canteen does not lead to a bladder or a tank, it folds inward upon itself, creating a topological throat that bypasses local spacetime. Effectively, this is a Klein bottle weaponized for hydration. There is no bottom to this flask because the bottom exists in a different coordinate system. We are observing a piece of spatial engineering, a pocket dimension stabilized within a metal shell. The civilization that manufactured this object did not solve the problem of water storage. They rendered the concept of capacity obsolete. When we unscrew the cap, utilizing a remote manipulator arm to avoid thermal injury, we are greeted not by the gentle gurgle of a pouring vessel, but by a hiss. It is the sound of pressure equalization. The air around the opening instantly condenses into a thick, white fog. Thermographic sensors register a temperature drop at the aperture to near cryogenic levels. The liquid that emerges is not planetary water. Isotopic analysis reveals a deuterium ratio consistent with cometary ice or deep space nebula condensation. It is protowater, primordial, sterile, and aggressively cold. It tastes of ozone and crushed rock. It has never known the pollution of a biological ecosystem. It has been harvested directly from a source that predates the formation of this solar system. The provenance of this artifact offers a grim context for such extreme engineering. The salt wastes where it was found are a planetary desert with zero precipitation and zero groundwater. Life should be impossible there. Yet, we found the ruins of a sprawling, industrial metropolis. They survived for centuries without a drop of rain, sustained entirely by these metal apertures. Every citizen carried an ocean on their hip. But observe the structural fatigue around the neck of the canteen. The metal is micro-fractured, appearing almost brittle. This is not impact damage. This is metric shear. The stress of holding a portal open against the elasticity of the universe is immense. The alloy is constantly fighting to snap the hole shut. We can hear it, if we listen closely with audio enhancement, a low, resonant hum, like a finger circling the rim of a wine glass. It is the sound of the canteen straining to keep the connection to the infinite well alive. Moving beyond the localized geometry of the flask, we must trace the origin of the liquid itself. To understand the hydro-canteen, one must understand the destination of its internal wormhole. Through the use of a quantum-entangled drone, sent microscopically through the neck of Artifact 9 Beta, we have managed to glimpse the other side of the spatial fold. The water does not come from a cloud. It does not come from a subterranean lake. The aperture opens directly into a subdimensional expanse we have designated Aquifer Omega. The telemetry returned by the drone before it was crushed is harrowing. Aquifer Omega is a reality composed entirely of liquid. There is no surface, no seabed, and no light. It is an infinite, isotropic ocean of pressurized fluid, existing in a universe where the gravitational constant is 3 times that of our own. This explains the violence of the canteen's function. The device is not a pump, it is a throttle. When a soldier of the salt wastes unscrewed the cap, they were not pouring water out, they were holding back a geyser. The internal valve mechanism of the canteen is a masterpiece of containment engineering. Designed to step down the hydrostatic pressure from 40,000 pounds per square inch to a manageable trickle. If this regulator were to fail, the stream of water emerging from the neck would not hydrate the user, it would decapitate them. It would function as a high-velocity hydrojet cutter, slicing through bone and armor with the indifference of industrial machinery. This creates a paradox of function. The most dangerous object on the battlefield was not the rifle, but the water bottle. The societal implications of this hydraulic theft are visible in the stratigraphy of their cities. We find no evidence of aqueducts, reservoirs, or sewage treatment plants. Why build infrastructure when the supply is infinite and the source is non-local? The civilization bypassed the need for hydrology. They practiced a form of point-source urbanism. If a factory needed cooling, they simply opened a larger aperture. If a field needed irrigation, they installed a spatial tether and flooded the desert. However, this reliance on an alien dimension bred a specific kind of arrogance. They viewed water not as a cycle, but as a linear resource, a commodity to be extracted from the void. But they failed to ask the fundamental question: is Aquifer Omega empty? Microscopic analysis of the sediment trapped in the canteen's mesh filters reveals the answer. We found silica structures. We found amino acid chains that twist to the left, contrary to terrestrial biology, and most disturbingly, we found fragments of chitinous plating. The water was not sterile. It was inhabited. The civilization was not merely extracting moisture. They were draining the biosphere of a deep-sea ecosystem. We have identified these microscopic contaminants as abyssal plankton. In their home dimension, under crushing pressure, they are the base of a food chain. By consuming this water, the people of the salt wastes were ingesting the biological heritage of another reality. We can only speculate on the long-term health effects of this xenophagic hydration. Did the proteins of Aquifer Omega integrate with their biology? We found skeletal remains with bone densities far exceeding the human norm. Perhaps a side effect of consuming heavy water isotopes and alien minerals. They were slowly becoming compatible with the ocean they drank. But the true cost of this technology was physical, not biological. Maintaining a stable wormhole, even a small one like the neck of a canteen, requires an anchor. We call this a spatial tether. The canteen acts as the heavy end of a rope, keeping the portal from snapping back to its point of origin. To keep these millions of microportals open, the civilization constructed massive, resonance pylons in their capital cities. These towers broadcasted a stabilizing frequency, a key, that kept the locks on the canteens turned. This reveals the fragility of their logistical miracle. Their entire water supply was wireless. It was dependent on a signal. I find the schematics of these pylons deeply unsettling. They were not just broadcasting, they were pulling. They were dragging the fabric of Aquifer Omega closer to their own dimension, thinning the barrier between the two realities to reduce the energy cost of the transfer. They were trying to bring the ocean to the desert, not realizing that an ocean of that magnitude does not like to be moved. The Hydro-Canteen was, therefore, a dual-use device. To the soldier, it was life. To the universe, it was a stress fracture. Every time a cap was unscrewed, the structural integrity of local space-time was weakened. A billion tiny holes were punched in the hull of their reality. They were bleeding the pressure of one universe into another, blissfully unaware that pressure always seeks equilibrium. They treated the laws of physics as a suggestion, and for 300 years, it worked. The desert bloomed, the factories hummed, they drank the cool, black water of the void and believed they had conquered thirst. But they had forgotten the first rule of plumbing. Never connect a high-pressure system to a low-pressure system without a fail-safe. The collapse of the salt waste civilization offers a terrifying lesson in the physics of equilibrium. Nature abhors a vacuum, but it abhors a pressure differential even more. The end arrived not as a slow decline, but as a singular acoustic event, a hydrostatic equalization that occurred simultaneously across the entire planet. It began with the resonance pylons, Our forensic reconstruction suggests a harmonic feedback loop in the stabilization signal, a glitch that should have triggered an emergency shutdown of the spatial folds. Instead, it caused the aperture seals to lock in the open position. At 9 o'clock hours local time, every hydro-canteen, every irrigation valve, and every industrial spatial tether on the planet failed to close. The result was not a flood in the traditional sense. It was a pressurized injection. Millions of apertures, ranging from the neck of this canteen to city-sized floodgates, instantly began venting Aquifer Omega into the low-pressure atmosphere of Sector 4. Shutterstock. The water did not flow, it detonated, emerging at supersonic speeds driven by 40,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. The streams from personal canteens acted like kinetic energy weapons. Soldiers were not drowned, they were bisected by their own hydration gear. The water jetting from their hips cut through ceramic armor and flesh before they could register the malfunction. In the cities, the industrial portals became geysers of apocalyptic magnitude. Columns of super-cooled, hyper-pressurized water punched through the cloud layer, stripping the atmosphere and crushing the architectural infrastructure instantly. The buildings were not washed away, they were pulverized by the sheer concussive force of the arrival. We found the drowned council in the high tower of the Capitol. They were not submerged. They were embedded into the stone of the back wall, flattened by the hydrostatic shockwave that erupted from the ceremonial fountain in the center of the room. They had invited the ocean into their home, and the ocean had accepted the invitation with absolute, crushing enthusiasm. The salt wastes are salt today because of this event. The deluge was so massive that it temporarily terraformed the planet, turning the desert into a global ocean within days. But the water of Aquifer Omega was not chemically stable in this dimension. Exposed to our sun and low pressure, it boiled off rapidly over the following decades, leaving behind a crust of alien minerals and the shattered bones of a civilization that died of thirst while drowning. They assumed that because they held the tap, they controlled the flow. They failed to realize that the tap was the only thing holding back the weight of a universe.